I want you to imagine something for a second. By the end of this decade, the most powerful, structurally dominant technology company on Earth might not be headquartered in some sleek glass campus in Silicon Valley.
Right. Or Seattle.
Yeah, or Austin or Shenzhen, none of the usual suspects. It might actually be sitting at the base of Mount Everest.
Which, I mean, it sounds like science fiction at first.
Totally. But today we are doing a deep dive into a stack of incredibly provocative documents published on the Netizen platform. These came out on June 1st, 2026.
And they outline the master plan of this entity called Himalayan Compute.
Exactly. And the premise here is wild. We're exploring this idea that the AI revolution has hit a brutal, completely unavoidable physical bottleneck. And more importantly, that traditional venture capital is entirely blind to the solution.
Which is what makes these documents so compelling to dissect, right? They aren't just pitching like a new software layer or some marginal improvement in algorithmic efficiency.
Right, they're going way bigger.
Huge. They are arguing for a fundamental realignment of global infrastructure. They're making the case that Nepal's specific geographical topography, specifically its vast, untapped hydropower, is the actual key to unlocking a trillion-dollar industry.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because right off the bat, as someone who watches the tech sector pretty closely, I have to admit that going from the peaks of the Himalayas to the frontier of artificial intelligence is, well, it's a massive leap.
It's a huge mental jump, yeah.
I mean, I look at AI and I see code. I see weights, biases, neural network, massive data sets. To make the jump to rivers and mountains, we have to fundamentally rethink what AI even is.
Exactly.
So let's start at the foundational thesis of these sources. They frame this entire thing around the economic concepts of scarcity and abundance.
Right, and to really understand why Nepal matters, you have to look at the macroeconomic history of human progress. The sources argue that every major leap in civilization is just the story of humanity taking a critically scarce resource.
Like whatever the bottleneck of that era is.
It's exactly, and engineering it into abundance. So we took caloric energy, right, food, which used to be incredibly scarce and entirely dependent on local weather.
A bad winter meant famine.
Right, but through the agricultural and industrial revolutions, we made it abundant. We effectively ended recurring systemic famines in the developed world.
Wow, yeah.
And then we took mechanical power, which used to require human or animal muscle, and made that abundant through the steam engine and eventually the electrical grid.
And then information and distribution through the internet.
Exactly. The internet made the distribution of information essentially free and infinite.
And so the Netizen documents are arguing that the scarce resource today, like the main bottleneck of the 21st century, is intelligence.
That's the core thesis.
Yeah.
Because for the entirety of human history, if a hospital needed more diagnostic intelligence or a government needed more strategic intelligence,
they hit a biological ceiling.
right, you had to find a human, educate them for 20 years, train them in a specialty for another 10, and then, if you're lucky, you get roughly 40 hours a week of their cognitive output.
Which is wildly inefficient when you think about it like that.
It is. Human intelligence is fiercely scarce. It just does not scale. But AI changes that underlying physics. For the first time, intelligence is being decoupled from biological constraints.
It's becoming a manufactured commodity.
Yes. A physical manufactured commodity.
I mean, the utopian angle here is obvious, and the sources definitely don't shy away from it.
Oh, they lean right into it.
They talk about this future where every student on the planet has a personalized tutor that understands their exact learning style. Every doctor has an instantly updated superhuman diagnostic assistant. Every startup has an elite board of strategic advisors.
It's the ultimate promise of the technology.
But here is my immediate pushback. We hear this utopian pitch every single day from Silicon Valley.
Sure do.
We are constantly told that algorithms are just getting exponentially more efficient. I mean, we have models running locally on our laptops now.
Yeah, edge computing is definitely advancing.
So why all the doom and gloom about a physical bottleneck? Why do we need Himalayan rivers if the code is just getting smarter and leaner?
Because efficiency gains in software are being entirely outstripped by the sheer scale of demand. What's fascinating here is the collision between theoretical computer science and thermodynamics.
Thermodynamics, like heat and energy.
Exactly. We've relied for decades on Moore's law and Dennard scaling, and this idea that transistors just get smaller, faster, and miraculously require less power.
The magic of Silicon Valley.
Right, but Dennard scaling actually broke down years ago. We can't just make chips infinitely more power efficient anymore. To get exponentially smarter AI, you need exponentially more parameters,
Which means more hardware.
which means you need to string together tens of thousands and soon millions of GPUs. And GPUs require raw physical electricity.
They are incredibly power hungry.
Unbelievably so. Every prompt you type, every training run, it requires literal power plant capacity.
It reminds me of the Industrial Revolution. It didn't happen just because machines were invented, right?
No, the Greeks had basic steam engines.
Exactly. The concepts existed for centuries. It only happened because productive power coal and later electricity became cheap and universally available.
That's a perfect analogy.
But wait, so if intelligence is becoming a physical economic input, are we saying that without enough power plants, the entire AI revolution just hits a brick wall?
That is exactly what the sources are saying.
But if energy is the absolute ceiling here, then Silicon Valley is geographically doomed anyway. You can't just build a gigawatt nuclear reactor or a massive coal plant in the middle of San Francisco or Palo Alto.
Good luck getting zoning approval for that.
Right, but surely the major tech companies know this. They aren't stupid. They can just tap into the existing national grids, can't they?
They are definitely trying. But the existing grids simply weren't built for this kind of load.
Yeah.
I mean, a modern AI training cluster doesn't just sip power, it devours it.
How much power are we actually talking about here?
We're talking about single AI factories. Just one data center campus demanding hundreds of megawatts, pushing rapidly toward a full gigawatt.
A gigawatt.
Yeah. That is the entire power consumption of a mid-sized city concentrated into a single warehouse.
That is insane.
And the U.S. grid is already constrained. You've got legacy infrastructure, extreme weather events causing blackouts, massive regulatory hurdles.
So you can't just plug it into the wall.
No, you can't just plug a gigawatt data center into the Texas ERCOT grid or the California grid without introducing massive systemic risk to the whole network.
Which is why we hear about data centers threatening to brown out local neighborhoods.
Exactly. The sources make this incredibly clear. Algorithms alone do not create abundance. An AI model without the compute to run it is just a theoretical math equation.
Right.
A brilliant AI strategy without dedicated infrastructure is just a PowerPoint presentation. At scale, artificial intelligence is no longer a computer science problem. It is fundamentally an energy problem.
Wow. Which completely shifts the paradigm. Because if intelligence is just transformed energy, then the nations holding massive, untapped, continuous energy resources are suddenly the most strategically important players on the board.
They hold the keys to the kingdom.
This isn't about who has the best coders in a coffee shop in Brooklyn. It's about who has the deepest reserves of physical power.
Exactly.
But that still leaves a glaring question for me. If energy is the game, why not Texas with all its natural gas? Why not the Middle East with infinite solar and practically infinite capital? Why are the netizen documents so laser-focused on Nepal?
Because of these specific, brutal, physical requirements of generating compute. It's not just about finding energy. It's about finding the right kind of energy paired with the exact right environment.
Okay, break that down for me. Let's look at the alternatives. The Middle East has incredible solar potential, obviously.
Huge solar potential, yes. But solar is inherently intermittent.
It only works when the sun is shining.
Right. And AI data centers need to run 2047 to justify the massive capex, the capital expenditure of those expensive GPUs. You can't just turn them off at night.
Oh, because the hardware is so expensive, if it's sitting idle, you're losing money.
Exactly. So to use solar, you need astronomically expensive battery storage to provide baseload power at night.
Which ruins the economics.
It completely ruins them.
Not to mention the heat, right?
It
If we are in the desert.
Oh, the thermodynamics of compute are absolutely brutal. GPUs generate intense heat.
You can feel it just running a video game on a local PC.
Right. Now multiply that by 100,000. If you build a massive data center in the desert, you have to spend a massive percentage of your generated electricity just powering the HVAC systems to cool the servers down.
So you're wasting power just to keep the machines from melting?
Yes. It ruins your power usage effectiveness, or PUE. It's highly economically inefficient.
So we need continuous 247 baseload power, and we need an environment that solves the thermal limits of the hardware.
And that finally brings us to the topography of Nepal.
The Himalayas.
The Himalayas. Nepal has some of those profound vertical drops on the planet. You have massive amounts of glacial meltwater flowing down these extreme elevations, which creates immense kinetic potential.
Gravity basically doing the work.
Exactly. This allows for what's called run-of-the-river hydropower. You don't necessarily have to build these massive landscape-destroying reservoir dams like the Hoover Dam.
Or the Three Gorges Dam.
Right. You just harness the kinetic energy of the water's natural steep descent to spin the turbines. It provides clean, renewable, 247 baseload power.
Okay, so that solves the power issue perfectly, but what about the cooling?
Well, you are operating at high altitudes. You have naturally freezing ambient air,
Yeah.
and you have direct access to that glacial meltwater.
Oh, wow, so you get the data center cooling for practically free?
Exactly. The physics of high altitude, cold water, and continuous gravity-fed kinetic energy make the Himalayas arguably the most efficient environment on Earth for converting electricity into compute.
Okay, the physics totally makes sense. That's a beautiful solution. But let's look at the economics, because this is where the Nedison documents make a really fascinating argument about moving up the value chain.
Right, the macroeconomic strategy for Nepal.
Yeah, because historically, Nepal's entire conversation around this water has been about traditional resource extraction. Build the hydro plants, generate the electricity, and export those raw electrons across the border to India to earn foreign exchange.
It's the classic developing nation playbook. You export your raw commodities.
Exactly. But what does that actually achieve long term?
Well, that's exactly the mindset Himalayan Compute is trying to dismantle. If you are a country that only exports raw commodities, you are effectively economically trapped.
You're at the bottom of the pyramid.
Right. You capture only a tiny fraction of the final value, and you are entirely at the mercy of your buyer's pricing power. It is the countries that take their raw materials and refine them into high-value finished goods that build durable generational wealth.
So the core thesis here is, do not export the raw material. Don't export the electricity.
Yes. Use that electricity domestically to power the data centers, generate compute, and export the intelligence.
It's like exporting raw lumber versus building and selling luxury furniture. Why sell the water power for pennies when you can sell the AI brain power it generates for dollars?
That is a brilliant analogy. Exactly that.
So what does this all mean for the listener? I mean, think about your own country or your own industry. Are you exporting raw materials or finished products? It's a completely different level of wealth creation.
It changes everything.
But I have to interrupt with a logistical challenge here. Because, okay, if you export electricity, you build high-voltage transmission lines. We know how to do that. But if you build a massive data center deep in the Himalayas, how do you get the actual output to a tech company sitting in London or San Francisco? How do you export intelligence over a mountain range?
This is where we have to look at the crucial difference between energy latency and network latency. Transmitting electricity over a physical grid is highly inefficient.
You lose power over distance.
Yeah, you suffer from what's called I²R losses. The natural resistance of the power lines dissipates a significant percentage of the energy as heat over long distances.
So moving power is hard, expensive, and wasteful?
Very. Moving data, however, is cheap and nearly instantaneous.
Through fiber optics.
Exactly. When you transmit data over fiber optic cables, the signal degradation is minimal. So the engineering logic here is actually very simple.
Yes.
You don't move the power to the data center because you lose too much power along the way.
You move the data center to the power source.
Right. You move the data center to the mountain, and then you transmit the resulting compute via fiber.
The text actually outlines this really poetic, highly optimized value chain. It's almost beautiful.
It really is.
It goes like this. Glacial water flows through the Himalayan rivers. The vertical drop turns the turbines to generate continuous electricity. That electricity feeds directly with basically zero transmission loss into adjacent data centers to power the GPU clusters.
Right.
Then the freezing ambient air cools those clusters. Those GPUs train and run the AI models, and the resulting intelligence is beamed globally via fiber optics.
You are quite literally turning mountain water into artificial intelligence.
It's incredible, but let's connect this back to the bigger economic picture for a nation like Nepal. Because the sources claim that compute might be the single highest value product ever derived from electricity in human history.
Which is not hyperbole at all if you look at the margins. Think about it. If you sell raw electricity, you are making pennies per kilowatt hour.
Right.
But if you use that exact same kilowatt hour to power an AI inference request, let's say, for a major pharmaceutical company running simulations to design a new cancer drug, the value of that compute is exponentially higher.
It's astronomical in comparison.
Exactly. And by recognizing this, Nepal stops being a mere exporter of cheap energy. It stops being just a passive consumer of Western technology.
It leapfrogs the traditional industrialization process entirely.
Yes, It becomes a foundational producer of the primary raw material of the 21st century economy.
This brings me to a massive contradiction, though.
Okay, let's hear it.
If the physical logic is this type, I mean, if the Himalayas truly offer the holy grail of cheap, continuous baseload power and free cooling,
Yeah.
and if compute is the most valuable commodity on Earth right now, then why isn't Silicon Valley completely overrunning Nepal? Why aren't traditional venture capitalists throwing money at this? Like, why aren't they funding Himalayan Compute to the tune of tens of billions of dollars right this very second?
And that is the trillion-dollar blind spot the documents expose.
It's the crux of the whole thing.
It is. The netizen pieces argue that traditional tech venture capital is completely missing this opportunity because their entire mental framework, their risk models, their very psychology is completely hardwired for software.
I want to dig deep into this because I really think it's the most crucial insight in the entire stack of sources.
It definitely explains the disconnect.
Right, because we all know the software VC model. For the last 20 years, the playbook has been standard, right?
Very stand.
You find a highly agile, small team. They don't need to build factories. They just need some cloud space and a few MacBooks. You give them a seed round of a couple $1,000,000.
Right.
They iterate quickly, they push updates daily, and they scale to millions of users with almost zero marginal cost. Their operating expenses, their OpEx might be high for, like Facebook ads and marketing, but their capital expenditures, CapEx, are practically non-existent.
Exactly. And that asset-light model has produced the absolute titans of our era. The Googles, the Facebooks, the Airbnbs.
Software eating the world.
Right. It has generated unprecedented, historic returns. So naturally, an entire financial ecosystem has evolved over 2 decades to identify, measure, and fund exactly that specific profile.
They know exactly what it looks like.
Right. They use internal rate of return, IRR models, that heavily penalize long payback periods. Software rewards speed, capital efficiency, and rapid iteration.
But building a gigawatt hydropower data center in the Himalayas is the exact antithesis of that model.
It is the polar opposite.
It's pure CapEx.
Massive CapEx. I mean, it requires surveying challenging physical terrain, navigating complex sovereign regulatory environments, pouring thousands of tons of literal concrete.
Blasting tunnels through mountains.
Yes. Laying high-voltage lines and deploying billions of dollars with a B before a single cent of revenue is ever generated.
So to a venture capitalist trained in the software era,
To them, this looks like a terrifying, completely uninvestable black hole. It violates every single metric they've been taught to revere.
it feels akin to imagine pitching the undersea fiber optic cable boom of the late 1990s to a modern VC who only wants to invest in mobile SaaS apps.
Oh, they would laugh you out of the room.
Exactly. In the 90s, companies spent absolute billions laying physical cables across the ocean floors. It was incredibly capital intensive. It took years to complete. And yeah, a lot of early investors got wiped out in the dot-com crash.
Sure.
But without that massive physical capex, the modern internet simply wouldn't exist. You couldn't have Netflix or Uber without the physical pipes at the bottom of the ocean.
That is the perfect analogy. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the sources heavily analyze the historical precedent of Amazon Web Services.
AWS.
Right. Today, everyone looks at AWS and thinks, what a brilliant high-margin software business.
A money printing machine.
Exactly. But AWS didn't win the cloud wars because they wrote marginally better load balancing code than anyone else.
Right. They won because they actually built the physical data centers when no one else wanted to spend the money.
Yes. Jeff Bezos essentially took Amazon's retail profits, which infuriated Wall Street at the time, by the way.
Oh, I remember. Wall Street hated it.
They despised it because he poured those profits into billions of dollars of raw CapEx. They bought the real estate, they built the massive cooling systems, they secured the power contracts, and they racked millions of servers.
They did the hard physical work.
They built a physical reality that was so massive and so capital intensive that it became economically irrational for anyone else to try and build their own. Everyone else's agile little software companies were suddenly forced to rely entirely on Amazon's physical infrastructure.
And the text argues that compute is going through that exact same transition right now. Compute is becoming a utility.
Precisely. Right now, every AI startup is scrambling around trying to buy their own GPU clusters.
It's like a gold rush.
It is. But in the near future, organizations won't build their own compute any more than a modern car factory builds its own coal plant to run its assembly line.
Right. They will just plug into the grid.
They'll plug into the compute grid, which is why infrastructure is such a powerful play. It serves multiple markets simultaneously.
How so?
Think about it. An AI software company building an application specifically for, say, legal contract discovery. They are limited entirely to the legal market. If that market shifts or a bigger competitor enters, they die.
Yeah, their market size is capped.
But the infrastructure providers sitting beneath them, they don't care at all. Because that same data center is simultaneously powering the legal AI, the autonomous driving AI in Germany, the protein folding AI in Japan, and the sovereign defense AI in the UK.
It's the ultimate picks and shovels play.
Exactly.
But let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Let's assume the VCs are wrong and this physical infrastructure is definitely the real play. I mean, I read the news. Microsoft, Google, Meta, they are already pouring tens of billions into massive data centers.
Oh, they're spending historic amounts.
Right. They are trying to secure nuclear power. They are building massive campuses in the U.S. Isn't the window to become the AWS of AI compute already closing? Like, hasn't Himalayan Compute simply arrived too late to the party?
The documents address this skepticism head-on, and their counterargument is that observers are suffering from a profound failure of imagination regarding the ultimate scale of the demand curve.
A failure of imagination.
Yes, because the amount of compute deployed globally today is not the end state. It is barely the prologue.
Really? Even with all the billions being spent?
Even with all that,
Yeah.
the models being trained today are relatively isolated. The future the sources describe involves deeply integrated agentic AI systems.
Agents that do things on their own.
Right, systems that run continuous, massive-scale simulations, manage global supply chains autonomously in real time, and effectively act as the cognitive engine for entire national economies.
Okay, that is a different scale entirely.
It is orders of magnitude larger. The compute required for that future, the 2035 future, hasn't even been fully designed yet, let alone built. We are talking about a demand curve that is nearly vertical.
Okay, I understand the demand side. The market is effectively infinite. But I keep coming back to the sheer cost and the risks.
The CapEx terror.
Exactly. Even if demand is guaranteed, building hydropower AI facilities in the Himalayas is a multi-billion-dollar bet. If a software VC is terrified of that capex, maybe they actually have a point. I mean, why wouldn't investors just wait for someone to invent a more efficient, cheaper way to generate compute that doesn't involve moving literal mountains?
Because that terror, that massive price tag and extreme physical difficulty is exactly what makes the investment structurally defensible.
Okay, wait. This brings us to what might be the most counterintuitive, brilliant insight in the entire Netizen stack.
It's a complete paradigm shift in how to view risk and defensibility.
Right. Because the software era conditioned investors to view capital intensity as a fatal flaw.
The idea being that if it costs $1 billion to build, it's inherently risky because you just have more money to lose.
Right, and it takes longer to get your money back. But the sources argue the exact opposite. They argue that capital intensity, paired with geographic exclusivity, is actually the ultimate moat. A moat, defensibility. Explain the mechanics of that to me, because this goes against everything modern startup culture preaches.
Think about the nature of competition in software. If you start a purely software-based AI company, and it only costs you, say, $2 million to build a really great workflow tool.
You feel incredibly capital efficient.
You do, but your barrier to entry is effectively zero. Because it is so cheap and so easy to build, tomorrow there will be 200 other agile teams from around the world who also raise $2 million and build the exact same tool.
And then you are instantly forced into a brutal, margin-crushing knife fight for market share.
Exactly. Relying entirely on transient advantages, like a viral marketing buzz or a slightly better user interface.
Which we see all the time. An AI tool goes viral on Twitter, and 3 weeks later, there are 50 open-source clones, and the original company is effectively dead.
Right. Software moats are fragile. They rely on network effects that can easily unravel or algorithms that can be quickly reverse engineered.
But infrastructure is different.
Very different. Infrastructure creates a moat out of unforgiving physical reality.
Physical reality doesn't care about your competitor's marketing campaign.
No, it doesn't. Let's say Himalayan Compute actually pulls this off. They secure the sovereign agreements. They sign a 50-year power purchase agreement for gigawatts of untapped Himalayan run-of-the-river hydro.
They build the tunnels, pour the concrete.
Right. They establish the data centers.
No one can just spin up a competitor to that in their dorm room.
Exactly. No one can clone a mountain. A competitor cannot simply raise a seed round and magically duplicate a gigawatt of high-altitude renewable energy. The sheer difficulty, the billion-dollar entry ticket, the multi-year regulatory navigation.
And the geographical scarcity of the resource itself.
Yes, all of that creates an absolutely impenetrable fortress around the business. The very thing that makes VCs hesitant. The extreme difficulty of the build-out is exactly what guarantees that once it is built, you hold an absolute monopoly over that specific massive energy asset.
It reminds me of the WeWork debacle, actually, but in reverse.
Oh, that's an interesting comparison. How so?
Well, WeWork tried to convince investors they had this massive physical moat because they had all these long-term commercial real estate leases.
Right, space as a service.
Yeah, but it was a fake moat. They were just arbitraging standard office space in major cities. Anyone with capital could literally just rent the building next door and compete.
True.
But what Himalayan Compute is talking about is an exclusive lock on geographically constrained raw kinetic power. You literally cannot build the building next door because there's only one river, and they hold the exclusive power purchase agreement for it.
Precisely. AI is brutally reintroducing the laws of physics into the technology sector. For 2 decades, Silicon Valley lived in this beautiful abstraction called the cloud.
The cloud is just someone else's computer.
Right, and that computer gets dangerously hot and requires massive amounts of power. You can't abstract away thermodynamics. You can't abstract away the physical limits of the electrical grid. The tech industry is suddenly waking up and realizing that whoever controls the physical power generation controls the future of the digital economy.
Which leads us directly into what the author terms the trillion-dollar question. I hear investors constantly hunting for the next trillion-dollar company.
Everyone is looking for the next Apple or NVIDIA.
Right. They are looking at software as a service platforms or niche AI agents. But the text argues that you don't reach a trillion-dollar valuation by building a marginally better calendar app.
You definitely don't. You reach a trillion-dollar valuation by occupying an unavoidable, highly defensible choke point in a rapidly expanding, globally critical market.
A choke point.
Yes. Look at the history of capitalism. The Standard Oil monopoly, the early railroad barons who owned the physical tracks, the telecom giants who literally laid the transcontinental cables.
And AWS in the cloud era.
Exactly. These entities became titans not through having a marginally superior product, but by owning the foundational infrastructure that every other business was forced to build upon. If compute truly is the new electricity, the entities that control the most efficient, massive-scale generation of that compute will be the economic sovereigns of this century.
I am tracking with the logic completely. The compute bottleneck is real. The Himalayan hydrogeography perfectly solves the power and cooling constraints. And the massive capital intensity provides an unbreachable moat.
It's a very solid thesis.
It is, but I have to push back on the risk profile one more time.
Go for it.
VCs aren't stupid. They manage risk for a living. If a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure project fails, say, the political situation in the region destabilizes, or there's some unprecedented engineering failure with the tunnels, it fails catastrophically. The loss is total. Isn't that scale inherently riskier than just spreading your bets across 100 different software startups?
The netizen sources actually dissect this exact fallacy.
They do.
Yes. They argue that investors are fundamentally confusing scale with risk.
How are those different?
Those are 2 entirely different vectors. A project is not inherently riskier simply because the numbers have more zeros attached to them. Yes, execution risk exists, obviously. Building a data center in the Himalayas requires elite engineering and delicate geopolitical navigation.
Huge execution risk.
Huge, but the market risk, the risk that you will successfully build this massive facility and then no one will want to buy the compute from you, is effectively zero.
Because the demand is guaranteed?
The global demand curve for compute is mathematically guaranteed by the scaling laws of AI. Conversely, when you fund 100 software startups, you take on massive market risk. You don't know if anyone actually wants a new AI scheduling app.
Right, most of them fail because there's no product market fit.
Exactly. With Himalayan Compute, there is absolute product market fit. The ambition is simply proportional to the guaranteed market demand.
Okay, let's pivot to the final major theme with these sources. Here's where it gets really interesting, because this is where the psychology of investing comes in.
The behavioral economics side.
Exactly. We've laid out the entire physical and economic thesis. The opportunity is massive, it's defensible, and it's critically necessary. So why do investors hesitate? The text talks about the visible cost of action versus the invisible cost of inaction.
This raises an important question about the incentive structures within the venture capital industry.
Right.
VCs are heavily heavily incentivized to avoid visible failures. If you champion a highly unconventional, massive CapEx infrastructure project in Nepal and it fails,
It is a spectacular career-ending failure.
it is highly visible. Everyone in the industry knows you are the guy who lost $1 billion on a crazy mountain data center.
It's the old saying, nobody ever got fired for buying IBM.
Precisely. If you invest in a standard Silicon Valley software startup and it fails, well, 90% of startups fail.
You just shrug and move on to the next one.
Right. You don't get fired for failing conventionally.
But what are they missing then?
What they systematically ignore is the invisible cost of investing too late or passing altogether.
The opportunity cost.
Think about the legendary graveyard of venture capital misses. The elite investors who passed on Amazon in the 90s because they thought it was just a low-margin bookstore and the capex of building physical warehouses was too high.
Or the ones who passed on Tesla.
Right, because starting a physical car company from scratch against incumbent giants was considered financial suicide.
The ones who left at SpaceX because private rockets were deemed literally impossible.
Exactly. The financial loss of missing a 10,000x return on a generational infrastructure play absolutely dwarfs the loss of a standard startup failure. But because that loss doesn't show up as a red line on a quarterly balance sheet, the investor doesn't feel the immediate pain of their inaction.
Which raises a critical point about the life cycle of an opportunity. The text emphasizes that the window for truly venture-scale, life-changing returns only exists before consensus forms.
This is a fundamental law of investing.
If an opportunity feels completely safe, if the unit economics are perfectly proven, if all regulatory hurdles are cleared, and if the mainstream financial press is universally praising it,
The upside has already been priced in.
certainty is the most expensive commodity in investing.
It really is.
I want to break this down with an analogy because it's such an important point.
Sure.
It's like buying concert tickets. When you invest early in something like Himalayan Compute, you aren't actually buying the present reality. You are buying the uncertainty. It's like buying a ticket to see a band play in a sweaty garage for $5.
Right, they might be terrible. They might break up tomorrow.
Exactly. But if you wait 5 years until they are universally recognized rock stars, until the massive data centers are humming, the power purchase agreements are locked, and Microsoft is happily buying gigawatts of compute from Nepal.
The risk is entirely gone.
But so is the 100x return. You are paying thousands of dollars for nosebleed seats. You are just buying a highly priced, low-yield utility stock at that point.
That is exactly the dynamic. And yet, why does waiting feel so rational to an investor in the moment? Because as each month passes, information asymmetry decreases.
Meaning they get more data.
Right. The company signs a key contract, they secure the land rights, they run a successful pilot facility. With every single milestone, the perceived risk goes down.
It feels safer to jump in.
It feels safer.
Mm-hmm.
But the text violently warns that valuation moves in the exact opposite direction. As risk decreases, the price of entry skyrockets.
But, and I hear this pushback all the time. I've heard this exact quote from VCs. If the company is good, I can always just invest later in the Series B or Series C. I'll pay a higher price, but it will be completely de-risked. Why is that logic fundamentally flawed when applied to massive infrastructure?
Because of the compounding lock-in effect of infrastructure cap tables and physical asset control.
Break that down.
A software company can always issue more shares because they're essentially just inventing equity out of thin air to fund more Facebook marketing. But physical infrastructure is bounded by reality. Once Himalayan Compute secures the absolute best, most efficient water rights and the critical geographic choke points in those valleys.
The barrier to entry becomes insurmountable.
Exactly. Ownership concentrates incredibly fast.
The door closes.
The door slams shut. The access to subsequent investment rounds narrows dramatically. The founders don't need your expensive VC money anymore once they have bankable assets. Once it transitions from a crazy, ambitious idea to an obvious, undeniable monopoly, the early investors and institutional giants swallow the entire cap table.
So you get locked out.
You get completely locked out. The venture-scale magic, the transition that creates real generational wealth, happens in the dark, uncomfortable period of heavy capex and high uncertainty. Future giants, as the author beautifully states, don't look like giants in the beginning.
They look like ambitious founders asking for too much money.
Asking for too much money to build uncomfortable physical reality in places no one else is even looking.
Wow. That is a deeply profound shift in perspective. Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today, diving deep into the intersection of thermodynamics, macroeconomics, and venture psychology.
It's a lot to process.
Let's synthesize this. The era of artificial intelligence is absolutely not just a software revolution. It is a brutal, heavily capital-intensive physical build-out.
The physical layer is everything now.
And the world's demand for compute is going vertical, while the traditional tech hubs are hitting hard thermodynamic and electrical limits.
And in that constrained reality, the untapped, run-of-the-river hydropower of Nepal, with its massive kinetic energy and freezing high-altitude cooling, offers a uniquely perfect blueprint.
It is a once-in-a-generation chance to move an entire developing nation up the economic value chain.
Literally converting the gravity of the Himalayas into the intelligence that will run the global economy.
And while the traditional software venture capitalists are recoiling at the billions required to build this physical infrastructure, that very terror, the extreme capital intensity and the geographic difficulty, is the ultimate moat.
It is the unbreachable fortress that will protect the ultimate winners from the endless, margin-crushing competition of the software world.
So the core takeaway for you, the listener, whether you are deploying capital, building a company, or simply trying to understand the economic tectonic plates shifting beneath us, you have to ask yourself if you are using the correct metrics.
Right. Are you relying on the lightweight, asset-light, quick-return software frameworks of the past 2 decades?
To judge the heavy, physics-bound infrastructure realities of the next one.
It's the difference between trying to evaluate a transcontinental railroad using the metrics of a mobile app startup. You'll completely miss the biggest paradigm shift of the century.
And I will leave you with this final provocative thought to mull over, extending beyond just the investment thesis.
Let's hear it.
The netizen sources focus heavily on how compute will become the fundamental utility of the 21st century. As ubiquitous and necessary as electricity was to the 20th century.
It will be the bedrock of everything.
But if compute truly becomes that foundation, if the cognitive engine of the entire globe relies on physical infrastructure, how will geopolitical power fundamentally shift?
That is the real question.
Right. We spent the last century watching global power dictate itself based on who controlled the oil beneath the sand.
The petroskates.
Exactly. But if intelligence is ultimately just an energy problem, will the superpowers of tomorrow be the nations with the most immense, renewable, physical, kinetic energy?
It completely reshuffles the global deck.
Are we watching a country like Nepal quietly position itself to become the new oil state of the artificial intelligence era?
Replacing oil with water and crude with compute.
Now that is a deep, muddy river worth diving into. Keep your eyes on the physical layer, not just the software. We'll see you next time.